Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Dukeman, and this week I have with me Mr. Eric Portwood. How are you doing, Eric?
Oh, loving life, man. Loving life.
Great.
Appreciate you having me.
Great. Yes, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate that you were able to make it work, and it's always a good thing to connect with people and share good conversation.
Absolutely.
So,
Much needed.
yeah, absolutely. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Let's see. I am 40 years old now. I'm married. I've got a 8-year-old son. He'll be 9 next month. Um, let's see. Me and you got connected through the Lion's Den.
Yep.
Um, I was a, I left I was a firefighter paramedic for 16 years, a little over 16 years. Um, Before that, I was in the Army. I was active duty, 11 Bravo infantry in the Army. Stationed in Hawaii. Never did any tours overseas or anything like that. So I'm not a GI Joe Rambo or whatever, and never claimed to be. But I like to say I did turn did serve some time.
Yeah.
But most of my time has been as a firefighter paramedic here in Hanover County, Virginia, is where I did all of my time. I'm a third generation firefighter. My grandfather started. Him and 7 other guys took a lien out on their homes to start the volunteer firehouse down the street from their house. And then my dad, he retired after 40 years in the city of Richmond Fire Department for Richmond, Virginia.
Mhm.
Um, Other than that, man, now so I left the fire service in November of 2020. Um, I was doing some soul searching, man. I didn't know. I just did a post about it yesterday. I
Yeah.
didn't even know. Didn't even know till yesterday why I even left the freaking fire department. It was coming. It's coming. Um, Pretty obvious that God has different plans for me, and it is very clear here recently where He wants me, and those things will come out as time goes on. Um, but my buddy was killed in the line of duty. Lieutenant Brad Clark. He was killed in the line of duty in October of 2018. So that was one of those things that I'm, talking about. I'll ramble if you let me, but
Yeah, you're good.
um, that's one of the things that I used to say. That's why I left the fire department. My buddy got killed. It was time to go, but it's become pretty obvious that my time was up there. I think I had finished my calling within the fire service, and it was time to move on. But I don't know. That probably is enough rambling. I'm scatterbrained, man.
No, you're all good. You're all good. Yeah, and I think a lot of people it's because it's the second family. And I always refer to the fire service as that it is. I mean, it's every bit as tight knit, if not tighter knit, than most people's families.
Yeah,
And it's difficult even for guys who have worked more than a full career to finally just hang up their hat. I had a battalion chief starting out that he just wouldn't retire. I mean, it was costing him probably money to stay working
mm-hmm.
based off of what he would be getting from retirement, and he just kept doing it. And when I got there, I was like 18, and they were like, "Yeah, he'll be retiring soon, probably this year." And one day I was like, "So, I heard you're retiring soon." He's like, "Really? Where'd you hear that?" And I was like, somebody just said, I'm like the young dumb kid." And he's like, "Well, when I have 3 bad days." And I was like, "Huh, 3 bad days?" And he goes, "Yeah, I've had 2 bad days." He goes, "But the third one's always turned out all right. But
Yeah,
3 bad days in a row, and I'm out of here." And so I'm thinking like, yeah, he's just trying to stay positive, or whatever. It was like 4 or 5 more years before
yeah,
he finally went out, and they pretty much forced him out because of his age, but he was still sharp, like great
yeah.
cheat. And it was just difficult for him because he didn't, even though he had all these hobbies, he did not know how he was going to live his life outside the fire service. And I've seen a lot of guys struggle with that. I mean, even when I left originally in 2013, before I came back, there was 2 years there where I was just kind of like, yeah, man, I'm glad to be done. I don't have that stress. But every time I heard a siren or something, I was just kind of like, oh, I feel really out of place right
Mhm.
now. And it's just, it's something that we have to be ready for. And a lot of times I think we probably have to just set back and really take time to listen as to why.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, that identity thing is what I get a lot I got a lot of guys reach out through Instagram and stuff, since I've done a few posts about leaving the
Mm,
fire service, and I'm like, man, I that just resonates with me so much. Like, how did you leave? I, I don't know, man. Like, just did it.
yeah.
It's the same thing as, you know, we all, especially first responders, firemen, policemen, military. I mean, you guys have a mindset that is like no other mindset on the planet. But when it comes to getting out of our own way,
Mm.
we can't do it.
No,
Like,
no,
we
it's
will not step out of our own way to do what we know we're capable of, even if we're completely miserable. Like, like, you get so many, especially firemen, they'll leave their wives in 2 seconds,
mhm.
but they'll stay in that abusive relationship called the fire department forever.
Yep.
It's,
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, man. But
Yes.
you know, it's the identity, and I get it. And it's been, let's see, like I said, November. So this coming November, it'll be 3 years since I left. And it's just now I'm starting to realize, I'm like, I don't, that was a part of me, but it's not me.
Yeah.
And it takes it does take a long time.
Mm.
And but it's always going to be it's a part of us that you can't
Yes.
get rid of. And
Yeah.
it's made you who you are today. I just wish some people would take that resilience and stop staying stuck and complaining. And if they really are miserable, to step out and go
Yeah.
jump. What's Sean Whalen always say, man? You gotta jump off that cliff and learn how to fly on the way down.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You did it before for something little. To
yeah, I
do it
mean,
again.
you spent 3 to 6 months in a fire academy having no idea how to do it or what you were
Mm.
getting into. For someone, some people, they didn't know what they were getting into, and then they started and they realized that they made it through. So I mean, you can do anything that you want to do.
Yep. Yep. If you want it bad enough, that's for sure. And I see that a lot too. Like even when and we're gonna get into this, but even when you get into like the darker sides of the fire department and first responders, that like the things that we deal with, we can overcome those things. We just have to decide that we're going to jump off the cliff to do it. We're going to do whatever it takes to overcome those things. And that's of course where I kind of wanted to segue into, because you were at this for a number of years, and we all see those things, we all deal with those things, and they affect us all profoundly but in very different ways. And some things that you would consider your worst day on the job may not have bothered me, but some of the things that were my worst days on the job, the things that were the most traumatic things to deal with, might have just been a walk in the park for you. So let's dig into that a little bit and talk about your experiences with dealing with trauma and dealing with those hard calls and
Um,
struggles, all that stuff.
I mean, I got made fun of a good part of my career just because if it was a shit call, like, I was tied to it some way or another, and
You were the black cloud.
it was especially when it came to the paramedic stuff. I was, being a paramedic and riding on an ambulance. I mean, it was the memes would be made about me, and why does Portwood always end up on the ambulance every single shift? Even if I was on the engine, it'd be working a rest or overdose or whatever, and I'd be off the engine on the ambulance, ride in as a second medic or whatever
Mm,
it is. But I don't know. During the when I was in it, and I can tell you the biggest shift in it's probably the same thing I hear with a lot of guys is once they have kids, um, the mindset shifts a little bit. Um, I mean, for me, I had several pediatric arrests like in a row. Um, one story, will always stick out in my mind. Start to feel the old lump in the throat when you when you start to talk about this because you don't talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
Um, there's one as a kid. We had to pick him up from a like one of those standalone ERs. I don't know if you guys have those or whatever.
Yeah.
We'll have like an ER that's disconnected from the main hospital. It's just a standalone ER. People go in there for minor breaks and sprains and whatever. But they ended up bringing a kid in there that had a brain bleed, and so they called us. I was on a ladder truck at the time. So here I am once again, as I'm supposed to be on a ladder truck that day. And I ended up at a freaking standalone ER because they wanted to land a helicopter.
Mm.
And, you know, ended up was not good weather. They wouldn't land the helicopter. So there's an ambulance service that works at that hospital. And they're like, you need to ride with us. I'm like, so I ended up riding. I ended up getting in, and the nurses come in, showing us or brings the patient out, and I'm waiting for the nurse to jump in, because that's what they normally do. And she's like, "All right,
Yeah.
see you later." I'm like, "But you're not going?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Nope, that's all you." I'm like, so here I am. I'm on an ambulance with no equipment. It's one of those, private company
Oh,
ambulances that have nothing. The medic
just
that
for
was on there,
transport.
yeah, she's like, all right, well, this, I'm like, well, where's all your stuff? She's like, she had, she had nothing. Well, he's on event. So we're just going to sit back and we'll just ride on down the hospital. And at that point, I'm seeing him start kicking the tube. I'm like,
Mhm.
he's fighting. I'm like, no, that ain't how this ride's going to happen at all. Like,
Yeah.
and, so ends up there's this third figure. He's got med student like scrubs on. He's got med student on his name tag. And and I was like, all right, well, get some gloves on. I'm gonna need you to, you know, hold his airway open here. And he's like, I don't need gloves. It's my son. And I'm like,
Oh.
oh man.
Oh.
So, that was just one of those calls that really stuck out. I probably rambled on with the story here, but long story, the child didn't end up making it, and the family wanted to recognize us for going above and beyond, and because we went all the way straight to the NICU. We didn't leave his side until the docs called him and or pronounced him,
Mhm.
or anything. And so then afterwards, we ended up, it was right around Christmas time too. So we took the ladder truck over and for his little brother and all that stuff. But that's one that I don't know. That doesn't even answer your question, I know, but that's just me rambling on the types of
I
calls.
but I feel what you're saying, having been through, especially the pediatric calls.
Yeah.
To me, those are always the worst, especially once I had kids. And it's just I've always felt like we all want to be when we're on a call and we're like an arrest or anything like that, and we're working a patient. We always want to save the patient. I mean, that's why we're there. We came there to
Yeah.
help. We came there to fix the problem. I've never wanted it as bad as I've wanted it with children, to just get that win, to get that save. Because if it's a 90-year-old grandma, you're like, man, she had a good run. We'll give it her all. But she 90, she had a good run. But
Yeah.
when you got this little child, you just look at them and you're like, they haven't even lived life yet. They haven't even experienced all that the world has to offer. And so it makes it so much more. difficult and impactful on you in a way that it hurts. It's
Yeah.
hard to deal with.
Yeah. And you also you start to realize how you process things a little differently when you are a parent. I had another arrest with a child, and we ended up having to take him to the closest ER, which wasn't even a pediatric ER at the time, just because it was like across the street from the
Mm,
arrest. And once again, like they called it. It could pronounce him right in the ER, and I just remember walking outside to the sidewalk and sitting down and just sobbing.
mhm.
And it that was how I processed it. I had never done that ever. I had never like I guess it was time to let something out, and that's how it came out. But
Yep.
one of the I was fortunate to always have a we had really good crews where I worked, and we talked about that stuff nonstop. We didn't we ball busted, of course. That's just part of the world. But
Yep.
when it came down to being there for each other and talking about those things, and especially after my buddy got killed, then the whole environment changed, because
Mm,
there had never been a line of duty like his in the entire metro area since for decades. So
mhm. Yeah, and I think that's important, and I think that's pretty common in a lot of places that the crew will talk about it. And oftentimes, I always felt initially early on in my career like it was the only group of people that I could talk to once I got comfortable enough to actually talk to them, because they had all experienced it. We were all there. We experienced something that is not normal and that the vast majority of people will never experience. And then before we're even done dealing with that experience, we're out on another one potentially. And so we have the repeated exposures, and I think that's also why the fire family is so close and tight knit, because you have those experiences, and that literally binds you together, because nobody understands them
yeah,
like people who have been through it, which is also why it's so easy to connect with other firefighters and medics just from all walks of life from around the country, because we've all experienced those things. That, yeah, it wasn't, I didn't experience it in the same town that you work and live, but I've experienced it in another part of the country,
yeah,
and the circumstances are a little different, but we we just pour everything we have into this job, into this career, because we wanted to help people.
yeah,
So we all have that common bond. Um, and I think too, like I've probably shared more good cries outside the ER with coworkers and other fire crews and ambulance crews than I have anywhere else in my life. I would venture to say that probably outside most ERs, there's more tear stains on the sidewalk than we can even understand, and
oh
not
yeah,
just from medics and firefighters.
oh yeah,
But
definitely.
we kind of, we try to hold that stuff in because we try to be strong for the family if they're present. But a lot of times, as soon as we're away from that, it's uncontrollable, and I think that's okay to let it out. I think that it's actually unhealthy to keep that in. There's a
Yeah,
reason why you look at societies throughout history and they mourn the loss of of their loved ones. I mean, there's some places where they're parading down the street, and the women and men are just screaming and mourning and just allowing them to just show their full emotion for the person that was.
hmm,
And I think that we do ourselves a disservice by not allowing that emotion to show. Um, Certainly, we want to be professional while we're in the middle of what's at hand, because we're there to fix the problem. But sometimes after the call, it's you just got to let it out.
yeah,
And certainly, if that's not your thing, if you don't feel like you got to cry about it, you got to talk about it, or any number of things. There's plenty of options out there. how did you deal with most of your stresses from calls? I mean, you shared about that experience and just being outside the ER, but did you have like a go-to as far as kind of resetting?
I've always been a very active, fitness has always been a huge part of my life. I hadn't realized how huge of a part of everyone's lives it can and should be until here recently as well. It's always just been kind of a hobby for me, and but I didn't realize how much of an outlet it truly can be. Um, when I first realized, and this was after my buddy was killed, I noticed a lot of people holding it in and not um, talking about it or reaching out for even professional help.
Mm,
So I went to a therapist, a professional counselor, and I made it obvious. I made it known to
mm,
everybody that I did because um, I believe I was a well respected person and looked up to in the department that I worked. I was like, if I can do this and just tell people it's okay, maybe other people will follow suit, and they did. Um,
mm,
and I mean, I even had a battalion chief. Even he wouldn't go reach for he wouldn't help, he wouldn't get help. I was like,
mm,
man, you can't help us if you don't help yourself. And you know, it was several months later. He's like, hey man, and he finally did. And he's like, hey, wise man told me that I can't help you guys if I don't help me. And I was like, well, so sometimes you just got to put yourself out there and make yourself a little bit vulnerable to help those others, as your podcast is
mm,
obviously doing, is having these conversations. And you never know, the one conversation, a one sentence that you and I say between one another on this podcast, it might help somebody to take that next step, whether that be just reaching out to their loved one, their significant other, wife or husband, and just talking to them. If you have I'm lucky to have a very supportive wife that I have been able to be extremely, open with on all of those things without feeling like I'm a complete pansy. Like, some guys may feel that way. They may
mm.
not feel comfortable talking to their wives. And if that is the case, you do need to find somebody that you're comfortable
Yeah.
talking to. Um, I think we a lot of, and then there's, you talk about, you asked about other coping mechanisms or whatever. And, there's a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms
Oh, absolutely.
as firemen, we love to drink. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
that's just what we do. I mean, that's what you're sold as. And, that's what's sold on TV shows. It's what's sold on movies. Same with the military cops. I mean,
Yep.
it's just what, well, those guys are hard chargers. They're crazy, man. We go have some drinks afterwards and we'll just drown these tears away.
Yep.
I did that for years. I mean,
Yep.
I still have a
Yep.
drink every once in a while, but I definitely we drank a lot. I mean, it
Yeah, I don't
was
I don't drink I don't drink to find the bottom of the bottle anymore.
oh, we
It's
would
it's
search
just
for
to
other
have a
bottles
drink
to
or two. But yeah. Yeah, they didn't make them deep enough back
no,
then.
and then the more you drink, the dumber the decisions and the tougher you are, and the less you need help. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, there's definitely lots of negatives that of ways to cope with things. And unfortunately, those are the things that are glorified the most, especially in the movies like you talked about. I
yep,
mean, you look at virtually any movie some that features any military first responders,
yep,
somebody dies, and then the very next scene is like some guy, the best friend sitting at the bar just
yep,
drinking his sorrows away.
yep.
And so we're subconsciously taught that
Mm-hmm.
like it's normal. And then, you know, we already like to drink. We like to celebrate our time with each other and like those things, the good, and then all of a sudden it just spills over into the bad that easily, and it really shouldn't. Um, and a lot of it, those negative things affect so much more than just you. Um, there's guys out there that they drank themselves to death
Yeah.
because they didn't think they had another coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And they came from the era of the fire service where we weren't really talking about PTSD. We weren't talking about trauma. We weren't talking about having stress debriefings and incident debriefings that we actually got to the bottom of the call and worked on helping us out, helping the ones who were on
Mhm.
the call to heal from that trauma. And I think that it's so important nowadays that we don't advertise the negative things as a way out, but the
Yeah.
positive things. And there's so many different positive avenues that you can
Yeah.
take to heal.
Well, I've talked about some of the negative things as far as like as like family, like because we all resonate.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot, I came home one day and I was selling real estate full time in the fire department. So, I'm burning the candle at both ends. My buddy had just got killed. So honestly, I was masking the trauma and the pain with overworking.
Yep.
And I come in and I'm standing in the kitchen and I remember looking at my wife and saying, it would be nice to feel appreciated when I came home after all this work I'm doing. And she simply looked at me. She's like, I never know who's coming home. And that hit me right square in the balls. I said,
Yeah. I've
you're right. You are. And I have heard so many other guys, say that same thing. We come home
mhm,
and we take it out on your family.
without even knowing we're
You don't
doing
even
it.
think, you don't realize you're doing it
Mhm,
because you're wearing this superhero cape and this mask all day long in front of everybody.
mhm.
And then you take it out on them, or they will see you at your low. Like when I finally reached out for help, I found myself, I was laying in my living room floor sobbing. I had I was just sobbing. And I heard my son ask my wife in the background behind my tears. I heard him, "Hey, what's wrong with dad?" And that was like another light bulb moment.
Yep.
My son absolutely needs to see his dad cry.
Mhm,
I think it's important for our sons to see their dads cry, or their daughters, whatever, to see their dads cry. We're not invincible,
mhm.
but we also need to let them see us get back up and get our shit together and
Yeah, absolutely.
move on. So,
Yeah. And I don't this is just, if anybody's wondering if like they're the only ones that feel this way or have had these conversations, I had the exact conversation almost word for word with my ex, that
mm-hmm.
she didn't know who was coming home.
Yeah.
Kids asking their mom what's wrong with dad.
Mm-hmm.
Kids being afraid to be around dad because they didn't know if they were going to get yelled at for something stupid that they shouldn't have gotten yelled at, just because I was going to blow up on the randomest thing that didn't matter. So these things are, I would caution, I don't really want to say normal, but they're part of how we tend to cope and bury things when we're dealing with trauma.
Yeah.
It tends to be
And
our
if,
outlet because our home is our comfortable space and we don't even realize that we're doing it.
and if you're not careful, depending on the crew that you work with, it will become normalized because
Mm-hmm.
you'll go to work and maybe the guys are having the same conversations with their wives. And what
Yep.
do we do as men? We'll sit around that kitchen table solving the problems of the world, and our wives are the problem. We're
Yep.
not the problem.
No.
So, we're strongest men on the world. We're firemen. We got it all figured out. Even women, they need to figure out what they're doing. They got us all wrong.
Yeah.
Not the case.
Not the
So
case. Yeah. And
they got us figured out.
Yeah, and so I think like if you're wondering like where you're at, if you're experiencing these things, like it's time to really take a close look at where you're at mentally.
It's hard being aware to,
Yeah,
to
it's hard to see it, and to want to deny it is such an easy thing. Like I wanted to deny it, but it just lingered in the back of my head that there was something wrong. Like, no, no, there's not. There's so many people who have seen so many more worse things than I have and dealt with this for so much longer. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm just being weak. Uh, but I wasn't. Like you need to recognize these things. You need to act on them. That if your personal life is starting to fall apart because of how you are and taking the work home with you, that's you're like in emergency mode
oh yeah,
to start doing something about it, because
yeah,
at that point you're, I think you're vastly very quickly approaching the point where your family's questioning if they can deal with you, and it's not
yeah,
out of them wanting to quit on you. They just don't have the tools. They're not equipped
yeah.
to fix you.
And then then you'll get into that slippery slope of those guys that they'll get so then that's when the suicides happen.
Mm,
They have gotten to the point to where I was another part of I had a guy I was in the academy with shot himself in the head. I mean,
mm.
I don't I that we could talk for probably 2 more hours about just that topic alone,
Yeah,
how how do you get to that dark of a place? And but I think they just don't know where else to turn.
mm,
I think think they feel that they have become a burden and they are no longer help. They can't be helped, and they are causing more pain to their family than they can fix. I don't know. I truly believe that the last thing that goes through all of those guys' heads is regret, though. As soon
I
as
think
they
so.
pull that trigger or jump off, however they do it.
Yeah,
I thought about that. I'm like, man, is it the last thing that goes through their head is, oops, like, why did
yep,
I do this?
yep. Can't take it back. And I think too, like for me, like, and I'm so grateful for it, that the deterrent for me was for suicide was that I couldn't figure out a way to do it without affecting somebody else in a negative way. And that
Yeah,
was that was down to like the kids, the family, but also having been on suicide calls, and not from
yeah,
first responders, but just people who committed suicide.
kids, yeah,
Like that affects every every firefighter, every medic, every EMT, every law enforcement officer, the families, everybody who walks through that door and has to deal with that. Even the mortician that has to come, the funeral home, the guys doing the burial at the cemetery, the vault. I mean, like it is so far reaching. And then it
yeah,
even reaches into people who weren't even necessarily friends with the person, because they knew them and they saw something. They
yeah,
saw something that they recognized as a good thing, and that person just didn't know it was there. Um, there was a kid that I went to high school with that had committed suicide, and him and I were not good friends. We had actually kind of been in a bad space. And the day before he committed suicide, he walked up to me when I was at my locker, and he just started talking to me. And it was kind of weird. And I was like, that's weird, because like, man, Rick and I haven't really got along in a while. And he was just like, hey man, I hope you're doing good. Like, it was good to talk to you. And it was just really, and I was like, man, that was weird. And it kind of like made me feel good. And then I show up at school the next morning and all these people are crying. And then I found out why. And I was like, man, like this guy and I hadn't even been on good terms until yesterday afternoon. And that profoundly affected me. And I
yeah,
wasn't even like a close friend of his. But just because I can remember the good things that I saw in him as a person. And so you could be just an acquaintance to that person, and that those good things are going to affect you because you saw something that they lost sight of in themselves.
yeah.
So there, to me, there was no way out without just causing this ripple effect of more destruction and more trauma, and there was just nothing good from it. And I really do think the last thought probably is regret. When
Yeah.
there's so many options out there, we just have to be willing to
Yeah.
take the leap of faith.
There's a YouTube video. There was I think it was Ed Milet that interviewed a guy that to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge or whatever, and
Mm,
he talked about that. You know, that being his last thoughts were like,
mm.
oh no, what did I just do? Like you
Yeah.
got some time to think about it on the way down.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a fall.
Like yeah,
And I think too, like you talking about that you were very public about your treatment. Once, like initially, that was really hard. Like I didn't want to tell my boss that I was like I all of a sudden I was missing some work because I had a lot of appointments, and I told them I didn't want to. We're sitting in the truck, and they're just like, all right, so this is what's going on. I'm missing work because of this, and I'm really trying to stick with this. And I got told to leave. I got told to leave the job by my therapist. They were like, "Yeah, man, you're like 18 years almost. You've done plenty. Just be done." But once I started talking to them, and then I started talking to my other coworkers, and pretty soon I'm talking to everybody on the department about it. And even to the point where I'm on this journey of healing. And when it wasn't working, I started taking additional steps and trying things that were way outside of my comfort zone, especially when you start talking about taking psychedelics for treatment, and you're in Utah, which is very like Mormon Latter-day Saint culture, the don't drink, don't smoke, don't anything. And so it was a weird conversation to have with a lot of people that, yeah, I'm going to go do psychedelic drugs to treatment in a medical setting. I'm not just going
yeah.
out on the street finding the drugs. But doing ketamine and taking those treatments, and it had a profound effect. And to have those conversations really normalized just the topic of mental health within the
Mhm.
department. And even to where we do a training, oh, I don't know, it's annually, semi-annually, something like that. That's just kind of like the well-being of EMS personnel. And I've taught that, and I've gone through and just provided lists of different things that you can do when you're in a bad spot to just work on, like just grounding techniques, meditation, really, really honing in on hobby, and being willing to seek out counseling and therapy and talking to your coworkers and doing all these things. And I really took it from the standpoint that it's important for everybody, but if we can instill that in the new up and comers, on those rookies that are new to all this and maybe haven't experienced any trauma yet, of just start doing some of these things, start learning some of these practices to calm yourself and to just recenter and feel better. Because if you become good at meditation or something that brings you joy and takes care of your stress level on a normal stress day, when you have this high stress situation or traumatic event, and you've already sharpened that sword because you've been practicing on the low stress things, you're going to be able to handle the high stress things a little bit better. Just like you said, working out's kind of always been your thing, 'cause you've been fit. Well, if you weren't a guy who worked out, and all of a sudden you had this horrible call and you're like, well, I'm going to go work out,
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have had the same effect for you.
It was a good example. I mean, you know, I've always worked out. The one thing that I have recently, and it's turned to God.
Mm,
Um, I've always claimed to be a Christian, but I've never had a relationship with God and like I do currently.
mm,
And I've also never been as clear as I am currently. Like,
mm,
and so, you know, for saying, and that's why I don't want to push that on people
mm,
because it's also you've got to step into that at your own time
mm,
too. But once you do, I think that, or I know that if they would just trust him and give it all to him, I'm not here to, you know, push religion on anybody, but a relationship with God and giving it all to Him, it gives you a newfound just peace
mm,
because you're not shouldering. You've given it to Him. You're really you. It's just peace.
mm.
I'm new at this, so
Yeah.
that's I mean, you see my social media. I'm trying to talk about it more, just because it is working for me,
Mm,
and I just want other people to realize that that is another avenue that they can take if they've ever stepped into, even the ones that have claimed, Christianity their whole lives. I can claim to go to the gym every day too, but that doesn't mean I work out when I'm there. And,
yeah.
I can walk. I might just be walking around. Same with your faith.
Yep. Yeah. And it is important. And for a lot of people, religion is what it is. It's the faith. And I always tell people too, like it's even if you're not religious, even if you don't have a relationship with God, have a relationship or a belief in something bigger than you. I
Yeah.
mean, even if it's just that you're, hey, like the universe is out here and it's this huge thing and it was created however you think it was created, but obviously there's some power there and energy there, and whatever it happens to be, and just to have something that with a surety that's bigger than you.
Yeah.
Because when we don't see that, I think it makes it hard to really have a full perspective of life and why things happen. And some of the things we may never understand why they happen, other than that they happen for a reason, and we just haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
That
You
someday
realize it
maybe that'll be
years down the
revealed
road.
to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lesson in all those things. And it's hard when you really start looking at the tragic side of things to go, there's a lesson in that. There's a lesson in that small child dying in a tragic way. And boy, I'll tell you, I've fought that fight, and I still do sometimes. Um, but just to trust that there's a lesson in that, and that happened for a reason, and I don't know what it
Yeah.
is, but I just trust that it did something for somebody or taught somebody a lesson. I mean, I know I certainly the last uh, pediatric call that I had, as soon as I got home, I just hugged my girls. Like
Mhm.
I didn't say a word. I cried my eyes out and I just hugged my girls. And that was probably what I needed to do because I wasn't in a good space. And I wasn't really like, they were already in a space where they were like, is dad going to lose his crap? What's going on? And so I think it was a big lesson for me.
Yeah.
It's a horrible, tragic thing, but maybe just perhaps it taught me to love my kids more. Maybe it taught me that I need to be a better father because I don't know how many days I have to be a father.
Yeah. And that's exactly the perspective shift for me. Like when Brad got killed, like I remember being pissed at God
Mm-hmm.
at
Yeah.
first. I remember standing in the gym vividly. I can still remember, I remember looking around the gym like all these dipshits are still alive,
Mm-hmm.
and my friend got killed. Like, why? And then it's slowly, I'm like, you know what? You're making me realize that this life is precious.
Mm-hmm.
You're making me understand that tomorrow is not promised. When he was on the way down that interstate, he was texting his wife going down the road in the officer's seat. He didn't know he was about to get run over,
Yeah.
you know? So you just every day, I mean, Sean talked about it on the Lions Den call today, is being present in
Yep.
every single moment.
Absolutely.
And that's, that had helped me. And then to look around, and thinking, I'm looking at these other people saying these dipshits are still alive and he got killed. But I'm like, you know what? Maybe these people need some help too.
Yeah.
Maybe they need to, maybe they're not dipshits. maybe,
Yeah.
maybe they're good people too. So I don't
Yep.
know.
Yeah. And certainly like when we're in that time of grief, like there's it's hard to turn it over in those times. It's hard to not be frustrated. Like I can very much remember being angry at God and knowing that I shouldn't be at him at the same time,
Yeah.
but still being angry and being like, I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't be angry at you, but I'm mad as hell right now.
Yep.
And I don't know if I'm not blowing up on you, I'm going to blow up on my kids or
Yeah.
my wife or some person that doesn't even deserve it.
Yep.
But
That's
I don't
giving it
know
to
where to
him.
go. Yeah.
That's giving it to him. Blow up
And
on him.
yeah, and it's a hard thing, but it's funny, like with this conversation I can think back to like a lot of things, that just how those struggles were so intense at the time. And they still bring up emotions as we talk about them, but just through gaining so much clarity and perspective on life and why things happen, and how to better deal with them, and learning because of the journey. Like it seems like I mean, at the time, those things were like, there was no way past that. That was a wall. There was no way over it, under it, around it, anything. And now looking back, it's amazing to look back and go, I got through that. As hard as that was, as dark as that was, I got through that.
Yep.
And I think that's important, because we lose sight of how far we've come, but we also in that moment don't believe that we can go anywhere past where we are right
Yep. 100%.
now. Uh so for you, um gosh, I don't know, you got anything else that you want to add to that? I feel like we just got really, really deep there. Now I'm just kind of like, wow, that was
I don't know, man. I don't know. Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, we can talk about this stuff forever for sure. And as we will continue to, and it needs to, if anybody can learn anything from the conversation today, I hope they can take that away. And, the simple, you're not alone, phrase is there, even if you feel like you're truly alone. For me, um, you know, you're not. God's there. He's
mm,
watching. He hears you crying. Even he hears you talking, even if you're not actually saying the words out loud. I mean, I just put I I woke up in the middle of the night last night, and I just what did I just I had to just I've got to reread it here so I don't mess it up. But I've been my I literally just changed my screen name on Instagram just because
mm,
God told me to.
I
Like
saw that.
he's like he just I'm being obedient for once in my life
Yeah.
and allowing him to lead me. Um, because I woke up in the middle of the night and it was like clear as day that I pulled my phone out of the and it just wrote down this exact, it said, stop trying to be clever, be crystal clear, concise, confident, and do it with conviction and compliance to my word. Only then will you put the confusion to rest. I'm like, you're right. Like, and that was to me, like, everything has been like a clever name. Like my little mole name was Armed and Dadly. Like,
Mm,
yeah, it's clever, but it was holding me back.
mm,
Um, I don't know. More is going to come with that, but so stay tuned.
yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's great that you took the time to listen to that and understood that you needed to capture that, that you needed to
Yeah,
write that down, because you could have just woke up and been like, huh, wow, that's profound, and then just rolled over and went right back to sleep, and then woke up in the morning and going, gosh, there was this really cool thing that I woke up about. What was that? How did that
yeah.
go?
I've gotten to the point. I have notes and notes and notes in my phone. I mean, I'll pull my truck over to the side of the road and write stuff down. Sometimes, like I swear it's just him talking to me. For a
Yeah.
while, I thought I was just going crazy, but it's
And you know, like that's a lot of people put it as like, you know, they'll talk about like you can be a loud voice, still small voice. It could just be that gut feeling that you have. And you just have that your intuition. Listen to that.
Yeah.
It's coming from somewhere, wherever, doesn't matter where, doesn't matter what you believe personally, just listen to those things because
Yeah.
they're there for a reason. And and you know, if you ignore them, you'll know you
At,
shouldn't have.
at least do something with it,
Hmm.
whether it just speak it out loud, whether it is like changing a screen name, maybe it's calling somebody that came across your mind, or making a social media post, or to do something with it, because
Mm.
that thought has come into your brain because somebody else needs to hear it too, or that's going to help somebody else. That's the way I'm looking at it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's it's such good stuff, and it's so like it's so important that we listen more. I always thought I was a good listener, and about 3, 4 months ago, I remember just kind of having some time thinking to myself and praying, and I was just like, what? How do I listen better? Like, what do I need to do to actually be able to hear you and understand what you're asking me to do? Because I was at a spot where I didn't nothing I was doing was working. It didn't feel like. It just felt like I was just like I'm putting in all this effort and just stuck in the mud, spinning my tires.
Mm-hmm.
And listening is such a huge skill because a lot of times we have some answers, we just won't take the time to listen to them. They're already there, and I know for me sometimes I need to just shut the hell up, including that internal dialogue in my head. Just shut up and just listen.
Yeah.
and and stop trying to dictate what that dialogue is. Just let it be what it is
Yeah.
and then act on it.
Yeah. Allow yourself to be led. We can't lead unless we're willing to be led. Um, Submitting to that and being obedient to that word is important.
Absolutely.
I've always pushed. I've been a hard ass my whole life, and I've pushed up against it, and uh, like to think I got it all figured out, but none of us do.
Yep. And there was one thing that I discovered this last month was that, you know, I was kind of thinking like, well, I'm still doing like some healing and some growth. And I'm like, but I'm getting close to being done. I'm getting close to like being in like that space that I know I'm just good all the time. And literally as I was sitting talking to my therapist, I stopped and I was like, I just realized that I'm never going to be done with this journey. I'm never going to be done healing and growing
Mm-mm.
and becoming better. And and it seemed like such a silly thing to say because once I said it, I was like, that sounds really dumb and obvious. But I just guess I had convinced myself that like I'm good. I'm going to be so close to good that it's just maybe a couple more appointments, this and that, and I'm done. And I'm just good forever. And then I realized that no, like that growth and that change and that ability to overcome and adapt, that's a lifelong journey. That's life.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally
Yeah.
life. You're born to do these things. You're born to go from being, you know, an infant that can't walk or talk or wipe its own butt to learning to do everything and growing. And there's pains and struggles in that growth. And sometimes it's the traumatic events. But when that hit me, I left that appointment. I was just like, it was so obvious. But I was like, well, lesson learned. I guess I guess I shut up long enough to hear it.
Yeah.
So Eric, how can people find you if they wanted to reach out to you or learn more about you and what you do?
Right now, pretty much Instagram's gonna be the best thing. I'm now Erickson Portwood on there. Erickson is actually my middle name. I've gone by Eric my whole life. And I still do go by that. I'm not, I haven't completely lost my brain. Um, but Instagram is where I'm the most active. I've grown a lot on there here recently. I have a podcast. It's called Armed and Deadly. I haven't recorded since March, but I'm gonna get back on that. And as soon as I pull my head out of my butt a little bit further than it has, it's been up there pretty far. So I've got it halfway pulled out now. So um, I'll get back on the podcast. And I don't know if it'll still be called Armed and Deadly, but if you find me on Instagram, you'll be able to find all my other stuff. Yeah, I'm all. I'll have so with Sean dropping his Lions Den price drastically.
Yeah.
Uh, I had the same revelation with my coaching group that I will launch here like now.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of other coaching groups out there that do the health and fitness and mindset stuff, and they're charging upwards of $300 a month to $500 a month to, um, you know, some of them are charging 3,000 for 90 days or like
Mm,
5,000 for a year. Like it's astronomical prices
mm,
these guys are charging. And, they're getting transformations. Um, But once again, God has told me I need to be able to reach more people and make it more accessible to everyone so I can help spread his word and I can help transform more people instead of trying to, you know, I'm not the king, he is, spread his word. So he told me to do $47 a month also. So I
nice.
was like, wow, okay. I tried to debate with him and said, really? I said, how about 200? Nope. How about that? So anyway, if anybody hears it on the podcast here and they want to reach out to me, then they got that price.
Yeah. And what's your coaching group called, or is it just going through
I
you?
don't even have a name for it.
Good
They
enough.
told me, and that was another thing. I'm not supposed to be clever with it.
There you
So
go. Stick true to that. Yeah.
I'm supposed to just supposed to help people transform.
There you go. Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited for you. I think that as we grow and we decide to do more, and helping people has always been such a profound thing in my life, and just always wanting to do more and figure out better ways to do it. And that's been just such a joy for me as I reached out and started doing the podcast, started actually talking on social media, which I mean, shoot, I it's been about a year now, and like it's funny to me looking back at how scared I was to start
I know.
posting videos, and how nervous I was to do it, and wanted to just keep deleting it, not sending it out. But it is such a blessing to be able to help people in whatever aspect that we're called to do.
Yeah.
And then, if you're being told to do it that way, do it that way, and you'll be blessed for
I have
listening,
no
and you'll
I have no
it'll show.
answer. I have no answer why. Like I wish I did, but that's
Yep.
what I'm going with.
Yep, that's great.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just as we wrap up, if anybody's listening that is in that dark space, needs help, they're unsure where to turn or what to do, what's the one thing you would say to them?
First thing they need to do is get still and listen to themselves and rest. Um, like we live in a culture of go 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 and um, you know accomplishing so many new and different things, and if we accomplish this, we accomplish that, then that's when I will feel better. But you need to take a step back, sit down, get some rest, listen to yourself, understand what is truly upsetting you, and don't be afraid to talk to anybody about anything. You know, if that's reaching out to you or I from listening to this podcast, then do it. Um, finding a healthy outlet. Um, and then after you take that stillness, you take that step back, you understand why you're depressed, you understand why you're anxious, you need to start taking massive action. Because when we sit still long enough, nothing changes. If our thoughts stay exactly the same, nothing changes. If we are always thinking about ourselves being depressed, we're just going to continue to be depressed. If we're always anxious because we're thinking about trying this new thing, but we never try it, then we're always going to be anxious. So sit still, understand where you're at. If you need professional help, get that. If you need to talk to somebody, get some rest, eat healthy foods, move your body, go for a walk outside. You know, nature is our own natural God-given, um, you know, what's the right word? um, treatment.
Yeah.
And then take action, because you'd be surprised, as you just said, how proud you will be of yourself when you start taking action, when you actually start filming those videos on social media, you finally start doing those interviews on podcast, or you finally just do what you told yourself you're going to do. You're going to, it helps. So that's a long answer, but
That's all good stuff though. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's all good stuff.
I appreciate the opportunity, man. You're doing good stuff.
Hey,
You're doing
thank
good
you. I
stuff.
appreciate that. Yeah.
I'm proud of you. I've seen like when you started, I've been following along, and I've seen you. It's like you're blooming, man. It's
Yeah.
great. I love it.
Yep.
It's what other guys need to see, man. Like, you can, we're all the same. Like,
Hmm.
we all suffer from the same crap. We all want to do a lot of the same things.
Hmm.
Just do them.
Yep. Yep. It's
People are
all
going,
about continued growth and just not being afraid to evolve and become better and having a desire to.
yep.
So, well, I appreciate you coming on, Eric. Thank you so much. And thanks you guys for tuning in to this week's episode. If you can, please go and give the podcast reviews on all the platforms, whatever platform you watch. 5-star rating, help us get it out there to as many people as we can. Let's change some lives for the better. And we'll see you guys next week. Love y'all. God bless. Thanks, Eric.